The silent genocide. The silence came first. Commander Sarah Chen watched her command console flatline as every satellite feed, every communication relay, every orbital defense grid simply stopped responding. One moment, she was reviewing routine patrol reports from the outer system. The next Earth had vanished from the galaxy's communication network entirely. She pressed her earpiece harder against her skull, as if pressure could somehow force a signal through the void. Static filled her ears like the whisper of dying stars. Around her, the Cheyenne Mountain Command Center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers shouted coordinates to stations that no longer answered. Technicians frantically rerouted power to backup systems that had already failed. "Commander," Sergeant Riley Kane's voice cut through the noise. The veteran soldier's face was grim as he approached her station. "We're getting seismic readings from 17 major cities, all showing massive impacts within the last 30 minutes. Sarah's blood turned cold. She pulled up the geological monitoring system, one of the few Earth-based networks still functioning. The readings made her stomach drop. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, São Paulo, Cairo. Every major population center showed the same pattern. Massive kinetic impacts, followed by secondary explosions, then nothing. "Get me a visual," she ordered, knowing already what they would find. The main screen flickered to life, showing satellite imagery that was hours old but still functional through Earth's atmospheric monitoring system. Where Manhattan had stood that morning, a crater filled with churning smoke stretched from river to river. The Empire State Building, Central Park, millions of people all gone, replaced by a perfect circle of destruction that glowed with residual heat. Dr. Marcus Webb stumbled into the command center, his usually pristine lab coat stained with dust and blood. The elderly scientist had been in the lower research levels when the attacks began, barely escaping when the western wing collapsed. "Sarah," he gasped, clutching a sealed metal case to his chest. "It's the Zephtrians. It has to be. The precision, the targeting, they've been planning this for decades. Humanity had made first contact with them 18 months ago, a seemingly peaceful race of tall, crystalline beings from the Kepler system. Their technology was far beyond human capability, but they had presented themselves as explorers and philosophers, interested in cultural exchange. Embassies had been established, trade agreements signed. Scientists from both races had begun collaborative research projects. All of it had been a lie, private. Alina Vasquez looked up from her communication console, tears streaming down her face. "Commander, I'm picking up fragments of emergency broadcasts. From the European bunkers, they're reporting the same thing: total urban destruction, massive civilian casualties. Current estimate, ... double quotes." She swallowed hard. 3 billion dead, ma'am, maybe more. 3 billion. Half of Earth's population, gone in less than an hour. Sarah felt the number hit her like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of her console, knuckles white, fighting the urge to vomit. This wasn't war. This was extinction. "Why the surgical strikes?" Kane asked, voicing the question that had been gnawing at Sarah's mind. "They could have cracked the planet in half if they wanted us dead. Why leave the bunkers? Why leave us?" Dr. Webb's face had gone pale. He set the metal case on the nearest table with trembling hands. "Because they don't know," he whispered. "They think they've won. They think they've eliminated the threat." "What threat?" Sarah demanded. "We barely have fusion drives. Our most advanced weapons are chemical rockets and nuclear warheads. What could they possibly fear from us?" Webb looked around the command center, at the surviving officers and technicians who had stopped their work to listen. Project Prometheus, he said quietly. They're afraid of Project Prometheus. The name hit Sarah like a memory from a nightmare. She had heard it mentioned in classified briefings, always in whispers, always with the kind of fear usually reserved for natural disasters or cosmic events. A black project from the early days of space exploration, buried so deep in classified archives that most military personnel weren't even sure it existed. That's impossible, Kane said. Prometheus was terminated 50 years ago. The facility was sealed, the research destroyed. The research was contained, Webb corrected. There's a difference. Sarah, we need to reach the Colorado Deep facility. If there are still survivors there, they'll have access to the vault systems. Sarah stared at him. The Colorado Deep facility was a myth, a ghost story told by intelligence officers after too many drinks. A research complex buried so far underground that it existed below the level of tectonic activity, powered by geothermal cores and sealed against everything from nuclear war to asteroid impacts. You're talking about legends, she said. I'm talking about necessity. Webb opened the metal case. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was a single crystalline key. It looked almost organic, like frozen blood shaped into geometric patterns. This is a Prometheus access key. I've been carrying it for 23 years, hoping I'd never need to use it. The command center fell silent, except for the hum of failing electronics and the distant rumble of structural damage. Sarah looked at the key, then at the faces around her. These people, her people, were all that remained of Earth's military leadership. The responsibility of humanity's survival had just fallen onto a few dozen shoulders. How many others survived? She asked Vasquez. The communications officer checked her readings. I'm detecting emergency beacons from 14 underground installations worldwide. Maybe 300 military personnel total. Some civilian shelters are still broadcasting, but, she shook her head, not many. 300 soldiers against an alien civilization that had just demonstrated the ability to wipe out 3 billion people in an hour. The mathematics of survival were not encouraging. Webb stepped forward, his voice gaining strength. The Zephyrians made one critical mistake. They studied our public technology, our visible military capabilities, our open scientific research. But Prometheus was never public. It was created in absolute secrecy, developed by a shadow organization that existed outside normal government oversight. What is it? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew she didn't want the answer. Insurance, Webb replied. The ultimate insurance policy against extinction. When humanity first began exploring space, a small group of scientists and military leaders realized that we might someday encounter something that wanted us dead. They asked themselves a simple question. What would we need to survive if facing an enemy we couldn't defeat through conventional means? Kane's expression darkened. Biological weapons. Beyond biological weapons, Webb said. They asked what would happen if we could enhance human beings to survive anything. What if we could create versions of ourselves that were stronger, faster, more resilient than anything evolution had produced? What if we could make humans who could hunt in the vacuum of space, who could heal from injuries that would kill normal people, who could reproduce and adapt faster than any alien species could respond? The implications settled over the command center like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt her throat constrict. They created super soldiers. They created apex predators, Webb corrected. Human beings modified to be the perfect killers, the ultimate survivors. The project produced 12 successful subjects before it was shut down. Those subjects were placed in suspended animation and sealed in the deepest vault we could build. 12, Vasquez whispered. Against an entire alien civilization. Webb smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're thinking like a human. These aren't human anymore, not entirely. Each one was designed to be a force multiplier, capable of infiltrating, reproducing, and adapting. If they're released, he paused. The Zephyrians won't be fighting 12 individuals. They'll be fighting a new species. A species designed specifically to kill. Sarah stared at the crystalline key. And you want to wake them up? I want humanity to survive, Webb replied. The question is whether we're willing to pay the price. The command center's lights flickered as another section of the mountain complex lost power. Outside, the earth burned. 3 billion people had died, and more were dying every hour as radiation, structural collapse, and system failures claimed the survivors in the devastated cities. What's the price? Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. We won't be human anymore, Webb said quietly. Not the way we understand humanity now. The Prometheus subjects were designed to adapt, to evolve, to become whatever they needed to become to survive and hunt. If we release them, they'll save our species by transforming it into something else entirely. Kane checked his weapon, a gesture Sarah recognized as his way of processing extreme stress. How do we know they won't just kill us too? We don't, Webb admitted, but we know what happens if we do nothing. The Zephyrians will finish what they started. Every human being on Earth will be dead within a week. Sarah looked around the command center one more time at the faces of people who had sworn to protect humanity and now faced an impossible choice. Save the species by potentially ending it as they knew it, or maintain their humanity while watching it go extinct. She reached for the crystalline key. How long to reach the Colorado facility? 6 hours through the emergency tunnels, Webb replied. If the tunnel system survived the bombardment, then we move now. Sarah pocketed the key and turned to address the survivors. Listen up, people. We're going to wake up something that might be worse than the enemy that's trying to kill us. We're going to open a door that we might never be able to close again. But we're going to do it because the alternative is extinction. She paused, meeting each person's eyes. Anyone who wants to stay behind and take their chances with the Zephyrians. I understand. No judgment, no shame. This isn't a choice anyone should have to make. Not one person moved toward the exit. Kane shouldered his pack and checked his sidearm. Ma'am, with respect, we didn't survive the end of the world just to give up now. If these Prometheus subjects can fight, then we wake them up and point them at the enemy. Webb gathered his equipment, including several sealed containers that Sarah decided she didn't want to examine too closely. There's something else you need to know, he said as they prepared to leave. The Prometheus subjects aren't just weapons. Their evolution accelerated beyond natural limits. Once there, awake, they'll begin adapting immediately. Within hours, they'll be different from what they were when they were sealed. Within days, ... he shrugged. We simply don't know what they'll become. Sarah led the group toward the emergency tunnel entrance, the crystalline key warm against her palm. Behind them, the command center's screens flickered with images of a dying world. Ahead lay a journey into the deepest places humanity had ever built, toward a vault containing creatures that might save them or destroy them as they descended into the tunnels. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking away from the last moment when they could still call themselves truly human. Asterisk. The monsters we made, the Colorado Deep facility, had been waiting for 50 years. 6 hours of crawling through maintenance tunnels, past flooded sections and collapsed access ways, had brought Sarah's team to a titanium door marked only with a biohazard symbol and a date from decades past. The air here was different, thicker, charged with ozone and something else that made her skin crawl. Dr. Webb placed his palm against a scanner that should have been dead after half a century. Instead, it hummed to life, bathing his hand in blue light before the massive door began to cycle open with hydraulic precision. Geothermal power, he explained as they stepped into a pristine corridor that looked like it had been cleaned yesterday. The facility was designed to operate independently, for centuries if necessary. Their footsteps echoed off walls lined with monitoring equipment that blinked with steady lights, recording data on systems that had been running unattended since before Sarah was born. The corridor stretched ahead of them, lit by bioluminescent panels that cast everything in an eerie green glow. "How deep are we?" Vasquez asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 4 kilometers below surface, Webb replied. "Deeper than most mines, deeper than the deepest bunkers. This facility exists in bedrock that's been stable for millions of years." Kane kept his weapon ready, though Sarah wasn't sure what he expected. To fight in a place that had been sealed for decades. Why the secrecy? Why not just build better soldiers through normal military channels? Webb stopped at an intersection where 3 corridors branched off into darkness. Because normal military oversight would have shut it down. What they did here, ... He shook his head. There are lines even black projects don't cross. The Prometheus team crossed all of them. They took the central corridor, passing doors marked with symbols that Sarah didn't recognize. Twisted combinations of biological diagrams and warning signs that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Behind one door, she could hear a sound like breathing, slow and deep and impossibly patient. "Dr. Webb," she said carefully, "what exactly are we about to wake up?" He stopped at a final door, this one different from the others. Instead of metal, it appeared to be made of some kind of organic material that pulsed faintly with its own rhythm. The crystalline key in Sarah's pocket had grown warm, almost hot against her skin. Project Prometheus began with a simple premise, Webb said, placing his hand on the organic door. What if we could accelerate human evolution by thousands of years in a single generation? What if we could create human beings who were adapted not just to survive, but to dominate any environment? They encountered. The door responded to his touch. Iris patterns spiraling outward to reveal a chamber beyond. The air that flowed out smelled of copper and ozone and something organic that Sarah's mind refused to process. They started with genetic modification. Webb continued as they entered. Enhanced strength, speed, resilience, but that was just the foundation. They added adaptive capabilities, the ability to modify their own biology in response to threats, accelerated healing that bordered on regeneration, sensory enhancements that let them perceive across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Chamber was circular, its walls lined with 12 cylindrical containers. Each one was filled with a translucent fluid that seemed to move on its own, swirling in patterns that hurt to follow. Inside each container, Sarah could make out a humanoid shape, but the details were wrong, somehow proportions that were almost human, but not quite, as if someone had redesigned the human form for maximum efficiency. But the real breakthrough, Webb said, approaching a central control console, was consciousness integration. They didn't just modify the body, they modified the mind. Enhanced pattern recognition, accelerated learning, the ability to process multiple streams of sensory data simultaneously. And most importantly, they removed inhibitions. What kind of inhibitions? Kane asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected. The psychological barriers that prevent humans from being perfect predators, Webb replied. Empathy for the enemy, hesitation before killing, the instinct to preserve rather than destroy. They created human beings with all of our intelligence, an adaptability, but none of our restraint. Sarah felt sick. They created psychopaths. They created apex predators, Webb corrected. The perfect synthesis of human intelligence and animal instinct. Each one was designed to be capable of infiltrating any environment, adapting to any threat, and eliminating any opposition. He paused. They called them the 12 Apostles of human survival. Vasquez had been studying the containers more closely. Dr. Webb, these readings, they're not in suspended animation. They're active. They're aware. Webb nodded grimly. The suspension system was designed to maintain not just biological function, but consciousness. They've been awake for 50 years, watching, learning, planning. When we release them, they won't need time to orient themselves. They'll be ready to act immediately. Sarah pulled out the crystalline key. It was now hot enough to burn, pulsing, with its own light that seemed to synchronize with the breathing of the things in the containers. What happens when we wake them up? They'll assess the situation, Webb said. They'll analyze the threat the Zephyrians represent, and then they'll do what they were designed to do, which is hunt. Sarah approached the central console where a slot perfectly sized for the crystalline key waited. Around the chamber, the containers had begun to glow more brightly, as if their occupants could sense what was about to happen. There's something else, Webb said quietly. The Prometheus subjects weren't just designed to adapt to their environment. They were designed to adapt their environment to them. They can reproduce, but not in the traditional sense. They convert. Kane's weapon was now trained on the containers. Convert what? Other humans. The process is ... biological, viral, in a sense. Anyone they choose can be transformed into something like them, though not as perfected. It was meant to be a way to rebuild human population quickly after a catastrophic event. Sarah's hand froze over the key slot. You're talking about forced evolution. They can change people, whether they want it or not. They can change people whether they consent or not, Webb confirmed. It was deemed necessary for species survival. The original research team calculated that traditional reproduction wouldn't be fast enough to repopulate after a mass extinction. Event. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. We're not just releasing 12 super soldiers. We're releasing a virus that can transform humanity into something else entirely. Yes, the word hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah looked around at her team, Kane with his soldiers' pragmatism, Vasquez with her technical expertise, Webb with his scientists' cold calculation. These might be the last normal humans any of them would ever be. Ma'am, Kane said carefully, maybe we should consider other options. What other options? Sarah replied. Hide in bunkers until the Zephyrians find us. Try to fight them with conventional weapons that couldn't even slow down their initial attack. We don't have other options, Sergeant. We have extinction or evolution. She inserted the key. The chamber filled with a sound like singing, a harmonic frequency that seemed to resonate in their bones. The containers began to drain, fluid spiraling away to reveal the occupants in full detail for the first time. They were beautiful and terrible, human features refined to mathematical perfection, skin that seemed to shift and adapt even as Sarah watched, muscles that moved with liquid precision. Their eyes opened, eyes that held intelligence beyond human, normal, predatory awareness, that took in everything and immediately began calculating threats and opportunities. The first one to emerge was a woman, tall and lean, with silver hair that moved like liquid metal. She stepped out of her container with movements that were too smooth, too controlled, as if gravity affected her differently. When she looked at Sarah, her smile revealed teeth that were slightly too sharp. "Commander Chen," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that normal human vocal cords couldn't produce. "We've been waiting." One by one, the others emerged. Men and women who had once been human but were now something else entirely. They moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared a single mind across multiple bodies. Their attention focused on the humans in the chamber with the intensity of predators studying prey. "I am Cain," the silver-haired woman said, apparently speaking for all of them. "We are the 12. We know why you've awakened us." "The Zephyrians," Sarah began, "have made an error in calculation," Cain interrupted. "They believed they were eliminating a threat. Instead, they have created the conditions that necessitate our release." She turned to study the other members of Sarah's team. "How many humans remain?" 300 military personnel, Webb replied. "Unknown number of civilians in hardened shelters. Insufficient genetic diversity for natural repopulation," Cain observed. "Conversion will be necessary." Cain stepped forward, his weapon raised, though Sarah suspected it would be useless against these creatures. "Conversion isn't going to be voluntary, is it?" Cain tilted her head, studying him with the same interest a biologist might show for an interesting specimen. "Voluntary, involuntary, these are concepts relevant to your current evolutionary state. After conversion, you will understand that such distinctions are irrelevant." "That's not an answer," Cain said. "It is the only answer that matters," Cain replied. "You have awakened us to save humanity from extinction. We will save humanity. The form that salvation takes is determined by necessity, not preference." Sarah felt the weight of command, the responsibility for her species' future, pressing down on her like a physical force. "What about the Zephyrians? Can you defeat them?" For the first time, Cain smiled with genuine pleasure. "Commander, you still think in terms of military victory. The Zephyrians have revealed themselves as a threat to human survival. They will be eliminated. But elimination does not require defeating them in battle. What does it require? Understanding their biology, adapting to their environment, infiltrating their population centers, converting what can be converted, eliminating what cannot." Cain's smile widened. "We are no longer bound by human ethics or human limitations. We will do whatever is necessary." Webb stepped forward. "The research files contain everything we know about Zephyrian physiology and technology, their ships, their biology, their planetary locations. We will study them." Another of the 12 said, a man whose skin seemed to shift between different textures as Sarah watched. "We will adapt. We will become what we need to become to hunt them." "And then?" Sarah asked. "Then they will learn what it means to threaten humanity," Cain replied. "They will learn why their ancestors evolved to fear the dark, why predators exist in the nightmares of every sentient species. They will learn that in awakening us, they have created their own extinction." Sarah looked around the chamber at the 12, at these creatures that had once been human and were now something else entirely. They stood with perfect coordination, 12 bodies sharing purpose and intent. beautiful and terrible and utterly alien despite their human origins. What happens to us? She asked quietly. To the humans who remain, you become what you need to become to survive, Kane said, or you become extinct. Evolution does not offer other choices. The chamber filled with new sounds machinery, awakening after decades of dormancy. Systems coming online, the subtle harmonic frequencies that seemed to be the 12's natural form of communication. Sarah realized that her species had just crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. Outside, somewhere above them, the Zephyrians continued their systematic destruction of human civilization. Believing they had eliminated a threat, they would learn, Sarah thought, that they had instead awakened something far worse than anything they had tried to prevent. Humanity's children were going hunting, and when they were finished, neither humanity nor the Zephyrians would exist as they had before. The age of mankind was ending. The age of the monsters they had made was about to begin. Asterisk.